They did a Doritos thing with it with a ball of fire in the middle, which is super cool. Chips flying in a ball of fire with the camera going around. It's like, come on, like that's so much fun.
Welcome to VP Land, the podcast where we dive into the future of creative technology. I am your host, Joey Dowd. In this episode, we're talking with Steve Giralt, founder of The Garage, a production company in Brooklyn. Steve and his team are the masterminds behind those awesome slow-mo food and beverage commercials you've probably seen for brands like Pepsi, Jack Daniels, and Firehouse Subs. In this episode, we'll dive into the world of high-speed cinematography, exploring how Steve combines robotics, custom-built rigs, and virtual production to create those jaw-dropping shots.
We actually made our own custom LED lights too. Like we have 6,000 watt LED lights because nobody makes them. So we've actually made a chip ourselves. If something doesn't exist, we were not scared to invent it.
We'll also discuss the future of virtual production, the role of AI in commercial filmmaking, and Steve's thoughts on the latest industry trends.
Each one has its new challenges, but it's all about how do we bring innovation to the story and the process on every project.
Plus, Steve shares details about their high-speed LED wall capable of running at 240 frames per second. And Steve will tell us about the craziest rig he has ever built.
Nobody died, but we were worried our Phantom was going to die on it.
Links for everything we talk about are available in the show notes, and be sure to subscribe to the VP Land newsletter to stay ahead of the latest tech changing the way we're making movies. Just go to vp-land.com. And now let's dive into the world of high-speed cinematography and virtual production with Steve Giralt. All right. Well, Steve, thanks for joining. Good to see you.
Pleasure to be
excited
here.
to talk about this. Yeah. So let's just start with the overview. What is The Garage and what's the story behind it?
Cool. Yeah. The Garage, we're a production company. We're based in Brooklyn, in New York. Industry City, which is a big old complex down here where we have Able Cinema, we got Lux Lighting, we got Lightyear. Now the new Martin Scorsese Virtual Production Film School is actually literally, you can see it. It's literally the building right behind in this window up 2 floors. And it's great. Yeah. Awesome community here in Brooklyn, filmmakers. And we basically make commercials. We started it based on me as a director doing just food and beverage, exploding food and collisions and robots and all sorts of crazy stuff. But now we have a director roster of 6 directors, everything from the stuff I do to live action. We actually have production that's wrapping in Barcelona right now as we speak. So really kind of a wide range, but all commercials, all very technical filmmaking in a lot of ways, really product-based stories. Just once again, we're here to make really cool content, and that's like kind of the goal of The Garage. And why I started it was really kind of like, come over to my garage, let's hang out, let's make a mess, let's do some cool shit, like let's mess around, and somewhere make some cool art, and eventually leave the garage and make some money. So yeah, that's kind of where we're at.
That's awesome. But you're probably what you'd be talking about a lot, and your specialty is the slow-mo, very stylistic, mostly food shots?
Food and beverage.
Food and beverage.
Products. Yeah.
Right. Okay. How did you get into that?
I started as a still photographer, and kind of was like, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I went to RIT in Rochester, New York. And I kind of left school, wanted to be a travel photographer because who wouldn't want to travel after college and after being in Rochester for a few years. And I quickly learned travel is cool, but not really what I want to do every day. And I, at that point had shot people, places, food, things, all the travel experiences you do. Everybody takes pictures of their food first, right? And the camera gets to eat first. That's how it always works out. And kind of started making portfolios of each of those different bodies of work. And then the food started getting the most traction. And I was like, oh, this is fun. This is cool. So I started shooting for more food-based magazines, ended up doing a lot of work for the Food Network magazine, so I would shoot Bobby Flay and a food thing Bobby Flay did, or Ina Garten and a food thing Ina made. And, and then with that, I kind of in parallel was also very technical and loved techie things as a gadgety kind of guy. So I loved the studio also. And, I started doing more studio-based shoots for people, product-based stuff. Victoria's Secret was an early client. I used to do a lot of shoes and handbags and, bras and panties and all the good fun stuff everybody wants to do. My technical side kept growing and growing and growing. And, it kind of overtook me when I started taking classes in welding and woodworking and all this kind of crazy stuff that kind of led me to what I called visual engineering, which was really kind of combining all these kind of crazy mechanisms that kind of throw things and collide things and move things in the art of filmmaking commercials and all that stuff. And that's where I kind of landed on the robotics thing. But I never had it in interest in robotics until like, oh yeah, I need the camera to do this thing like super fast. Like, how do you do that? Oh, a robot. So it's always been like the creative leading the reason for the the technical thing for the most part, and my love for innovation in general. Like I'm always like, how do we do the hardest version of this thing, in the coolest way possible? Hence what led me into kind of high speed virtual production, which is like the most painful thing I've probably ever tried to do.
So yeah, what kind of skill sets did you have to add? Did you have to like kind of become an electrical engineer or like learn, I don't even know, robotics, soldering, like what other skills did you have to get?
All the skills. Yeah. I mean, like luckily I just needed enough as proof of concept to shoot my first kind of things. And then you find people that will do that part for you. Right. So luckily I'm not the guy doing all the things anymore. I'm very much, at the garage. I'm director. I'm, founder of the company. I do all sorts of boring company things like HR and whatever. But we have a full-time effects team here now. Like we're a team of 9 people total here at the garage. So basically one person now is in charge of virtual production and IT, and one person's in charge of special effects. And we have somebody in charge of robotics. Like it's kind of a really weird collection of people that we have, but they're all amazing creatives. But for me to get started, like, yeah, I learned how to solder and how to use an Arduino and hand code a thing. So like the motor would spin a strawberry and throw it in the air. And I have a great understanding and could use all these things as I learned in COVID. I could still do all the things if I need to, because we weren't allowed other people for a bit. So I did like actually a national Budweiser campaign that was just like me and a food stylist. That was like it. And we were like flipping a burger on a barbecue with a fire effect. And we were like shooting on the Phantom and doing all this stuff. So I still have all those skills, luckily, but I do appreciate having people with those specialties to work with me as part of a team. As filmmaking is very much a team effort in a lot of ways. But that's kind of what led me here, and that's also what helps me understand what I'm asking for when I'm like, hey, slow motion, can we do that? This way with the camera moving at this speed, and can we do it in front of an LED wall, or can we do, how gravity works and physics and, all that stuff is really important to the weird stuff that we shoot, because, people don't think about it, but like, gravity and speed and physics is like really innate in things flying, right? So I want to say someday I'll get like a degree in like fluid dynamics, because we throw so much liquid around and stuff. I don't know. Yeah.
When you're planning a shot, how much of that is do you think of that like, okay, like we need the food to fly in this arc in this direction? Are you like, how much science are you getting into when you're like trying to map out a shot?
Have you seen A Beautiful Mind? Equations? No, It's not like that at all. It's more of okay, I want the shot on screen for this long, or I want to be able to move the camera this much while we're looking at the thing. Like let's say we're going to shoot 1,000 frames a second. Okay, well, within that amount of time, how far do I want to move? Because that's the thing. If you've never tried it, like if you're shooting at 1,000 frames a second, the camera needs to move really fast to feel it at 1,000 frames a second when you're playing back at 24 frames, right? Especially most of the commercials we do now are 15-second commercials, right? So like that's just one of many shots that are in there. So like if you want to get them all in there, you got to really be doing a lot of really cool speed ramping and plus the movement, plus all that stuff. But no, I mean, I'd say like, once again, we're just like anybody that's done a commercial of any other sort. There's still all the same process of a treatment and the creative brief and, doing the bid and producers and, all that stuff that goes into it. But creatively from my end, it's just a little different in that I got to think about time in a slightly different way when you're dealing with slow motion a little bit, where it's just like, okay, well, a drop of water moves from here to here in exactly 0.1 seconds. Okay, well, can we track that the way I want to do it? Or, how do I need 10,000 frames a second or whatever, So it's just, and once again, it's one of those things that's like, it's not like you're going to learn by any other thing, but doing it and trying it and, being like, oh, okay, so I guess that's the speed of gravity. Okay, that's the speed that this robot can do with, this lens or this camera package on it. So, how can I cheat that? Is it like, oh, I need to pan and tilt with it, not just like track it or whatever? So, you learn those tricks pretty quickly. And once again, we have a fleet or family, whatever you want to call it, of 7 different robots here.
Yeah,
From the
wild.
smallest one to the biggest one. Because we actually have a separate company, the Garage Motion Control, that does services of just motion control for outside productions. So, like we'll do Apple TV shows or music videos or SNL. We actually had 2 monster robots on SNL live with Travis Scott like a month ago. It's crazy. Yeah. So that was like live TV, which is really scary. And actually they use some virtual production with that too. But yeah, no, I mean, there's never a dull day over here where we're not either testing something for a shoot that we're pitching, or we're, testing something that we want to figure out for ourselves, or, that's the thing. So our whole space is like 10,000 square feet. We have, an LED wall, we got robots, we got all the other stuff here. Camera, we own a Phantom camera. We have like a Red Raptor XL X now, and yeah, all the toys. We've even made our own.
Sounds like a lot of fun.
Custom. Yeah, we actually made our own custom LED lights too. Like we have 6,000 watt LED lights because nobody makes them. So we've actually made a chip ourselves. Basically, we had somebody make it for us in China, and they're actually liquid cooled with these like copper blocks. And like, once again, if they made it, I would buy it, but nobody makes it, and I needed it because I need flicker free light and I need lots of it for high speed. And tungsten lights are just so inefficient that they melt the food and the ice cream and whatever we're doing. So if something doesn't exist, we were not scared to kind of invent it here, which is fun and painful all at the same time.
Yeah, that's wild. All right, I got technical questions. I'm trying to think of the best way to go about this. I guess the first one is more like, how has the technology changed that's enabled you to make crazier shots? Like whether that's the faster frame rates or the faster robots that can actually keep up with these frame rates. Like, how has everything changed in your experience since you've been doing this?
Yeah. So, I mean, funny enough, the camera tech hasn't changed that much on the, because it's really the Phantom camera is the only one that will go, 1,000 frames plus,
Mm-hmm.
and the,
shoot,
the Flex 4K.
What's the shooting at 1,000?
That's a 4K, 4K wall. Okay. Yeah. So our camera is the VO 4K, which is, so basically, hey, get ready. This is fun for the people that love hard drives. So in 5.6 seconds of real time, it records 72 gigs of raw data, basically, So in the time of this podcast, that's it. Your whole drive is full. The way it works is actually
crazy SSD drives or something fast enough to write that quickly.
Well, so it's a weird different workflow. If you never worked with the Phantom,
it's actually buffering.
It's a buffer.
Okay.
Yeah. So you stop the buffer, then you trim what you want, and you actually save that off. For us, we actually do it over 10 gig Ethernet, so it actually saves off the camera straight to our servers and like whatever. But the Flex 4K, which is the same sensor as the camera we have, has like a super $25,000 super fast SSD like drive in it, basically. That's like it's called the Cinemag, so it'll save like those 72 gigs in like a minute, which is pretty fast. But yeah, the fan does a very unique workflow. We also love the Red for up to 240 frames, because then that's 4K and you don't have to deal with the buffer or any of the things. You get the beautiful dynamic range the Red gives you. But the second you got to go above that, I mean, the Red will technically do 480 at 2K crop, like this tiny crop on the sensor, but then the Phantom's the way to go, basically. So we were, for better or worse, tied to that until somebody else comes up with something else.
And then what about the robots and being able to move quick enough?
Yeah, I mean, that hardware speed has not changed dramatically. What I'd say the thing that has changed the most is the ease of programming, because, it's not like it's live tracking anything, right? You really have to say, hey, this is waypoint 1, this is point 2, this is 3. You keyframe those, and it's just like, okay, connects the dots, and that's your camera move. Basically, it's not too hard to do, but like the ease of like changing focus pools and like all the other things around that. And it's kind of our center hub for triggering different pneumatic things or explosions or whatever we're doing too. So that's all kind of built into one timeline on the robot software. So I think more than anything, the software is what's just getting better and better. The usability and the ease of kind of doing things with actually smaller robots that aren't as big too, kind of, because when you have to, you need 3-phase and all this stuff, it becomes a pain in the butt sometimes, versus, our Bolt Junior on track is like 120 power, just plug it into the wall, you go to a house and use it, which is awesome. So I think they're getting just a little easier to use more than anything else. The cool thing too is that the robot actually feeds its 3D data out to Unreal too. So it's actually, we don't need a tracking system, which is really fun.
Right. Okay.
Well, we have robots, so we don't need a tracking system. Otherwise, tracking system is definitely cheaper than the robot. But so basically, whether it be green screen or on an LED wall, like you could literally be doing live compositing or whatever it is, and actually, as the robot moves, it's kind of giving you that data. So it's really fun for that purpose as well. And then you don't have to worry about latency at all either, because the robot could set a delayed offset for your wall lag if you have any. So it's kind of cool that way too. So, you'll always be dead on with your frustrum no matter what you do. So it's kind of fun. And that's the biggest thing we've been diving into is like, how do we tie the robot into the whole LED wall world and the future that way? Because we already have the robots, like how else can we use them in a new way and, do some cool, multi-pass, multi-layering stuff with the wall or whatever it is,
Yeah. So tell me about more. What have you been doing with virtual production and food and drinks, beverage shops?
So, for us, having followed it for the last few years, we're like, okay, that's cool. But, real time doesn't do me much good in the world of slow motion where we're at. And then we've been kind of following and talking to the people that make the hardware and stuff. And basically they're, we're like, okay, they assured us that the idea of doing 250 frames or 240 frames on the wall is possible. We're like, great, who's doing it? And it's like, it's possible. So we finally I was like, okay, let's give it a try. And actually, funny enough, I bought some panels on eBay that I found. It's like, oh, great, some row panels somebody was selling on eBay. I bought a prompted processor and like, let's just play with this little tiny, it was like 4 feet by 8 foot piece of wall basically, and let's try to see if we get the 240 frames working on that first, because once again, what video cards could play 240 frames a second for sure too. Like there's just so many, like I was talking to the guys at Disguise, it's like, okay, if I spend $400,000 on the Disguise system, will it play 240 frames a second? They're like, we can't guarantee that. It's like, okay, well.
So it's a lot of like everything should theoretically work, but no one's ever actually done it.
Yeah, exactly. Nothing was within spec. And then what we actually found out was the most painful was clocking, because there's no standard above 60 frames for Genlock, basically. So like we had to kind of create our own clock system, which was actually a lot longer than we thought it was going to take. But now it's like dead solid. It's actually more solid than the built-in oscillators in the cameras themselves that actually do their frames. Like our science clock is like pretty amazing. It talks to like the GPS satellites and shit, whatever. But either way, so that opened up the door to 240 frame a second slow motion virtual production. That also requires the robot too, because good luck live rendering 240 frames a second in Unreal, even if you're doing a blank background in Unreal. So basically it lets us pre-program the move, which is what we're doing anyway, and then we could basically bake out that movement on for what has to be displayed on the wall. So then boom, every time, no matter what we do, it's going to play back the background perfectly. So
so you're kind of like pre-rendering the background plate, so it's not, because you don't need the real time aspect.
Exactly. We don't need the real time. We know what it's going to do. Yeah.
Yeah. Not so handheld, like, oh, what's going to happen? Okay. It's
And the cool thing is like the robot will let you scale the speed of movement too, like same exact path, just at different speeds, like to the nanosecond or whatever. So like if let's say we're going to go 240 frames, we could shoot it at 24 frames and render the full quality at 24 frames. And that's just speed it up. So we're not losing quality trying to go faster either. So we could, keep the nice movement and lighting and textures and things going, or background actors or whatever we have going on, which is really cool. So it lets us be more flexible and shoot pretty much any frame rate we want. We had to make like a kind of custom workflow with Touch Designer to kind of be able to do this kind of record, playback, and we're using Simulate Live Effects to drive the wall too, which is awesome. And it's really been a great software to use as well. So yeah, between that, we kind of worked out the clocking, because like once again, the clock talks to everybody. The robot, each frame on the robot is the frame with the camera, was the frame with the wall, was the frame with the Unreal, with Touch Designer, with, it's like all those frames have to line up all the way at 240 frames a second. So it's definitely the most important, which is ridiculous that a clock is the most important part of this whole thing, but it really is. And the movement in the 60 frame timeline, if you just use Genlock and you try to multiply it, it's too sloppy. Everything doesn't quite line up perfectly. So yeah, we got that figured out, and we've done a bunch of shoots now on the wall. One, I think you could share the Captain D's taco spot we did recently, which was also very last minute. And that's the crazy part about commercials and virtual production, like you see like, oh, Mandalorian and Amazon show. And, like, yes, they were in pre-production for 6 months and then they shot, like we had 2 weeks from like award to shoot date where we had to create a world and we had to test everything and get approvals. And, so we're kind of working on making, that faster. And that's definitely part of our challenge as well, because commercials are never going to be like, oh, great, we'll give you 3 months to do this. Like, no, they don't work that way. They've gotten so used to just being able to wait and give you an award, 1 week, 2 weeks, maybe if you're lucky, 3 or 4 weeks. But it's part of the educational process that we're working with clients too on, like, if you want to use virtual production, these are things you got to consider. And, we're actually making some demo footage and stuff to show them, like, this is a 2D plate. This is a 2.5D plate. This is full 3D. This is, just to let them kind of understand the timelines and the workflows that are possible. Like, we could shoot tomorrow if you had the asset for us, right? Like, at the end of the day, it's a matter of like, how customized do we have to make the world and how much do we have to torture test the speed and whatever on it. But yeah, but for us, without the 240 frames a second, it wouldn't make sense for us to go that path. And our hope is, at some point the walls and the LEDs will actually be able to do 480 or 1,000 frames. But that, like, I'm not holding my breath.
What's the limiting factor for that to happen?
It's just flicker, basically. It's the speed,
refresh
it's the speed of refresh, on the panels themselves. Like, it works. Like Brompton, technically, their new card that they came out with will support supposedly 1,000 frames a second, but once again, there's no panel to actually do it on. So like, great, more hypothetical specs. And then same thing, like, what video card could play back at 480 frames a second? Or do we have to use 2 alternating somehow and clock them in alternating ways? Or, once again, 240 was hard, 480 would be cool, but I know it wouldn't be any easier from here. But we'll see. But honestly, like, when we look at our shoots that we're doing, 240 is really a nice place for a lot of shots. Yes, there's a lot of the 1,000 frame shots that have to be 1,000 frames. And for those, we could, print out a backdrop like we used to, or whatever it is, and shoot those off the side, because the amount of light you need to will change dramatically. And, our wall's like 1,800 nits, which is pretty bright. But to do 1,000 frames versus 240, I would need like, 6,000 nit panels. And I wouldn't want to be using like big chunky, outdoor panels or something. So it kind of, my hope that someone's going to invent, 6,000 nit, 2 pixel pitch, panels is just not going to happen, honestly.
Just for you.
Yeah, just for me, just because I want to shoot slow motion on the wall. Yeah. But the thing is, for us, we do so many liquids that, like, refraction, and like, that's why we don't shoot blue screen, like, or green screen, very often. Like, it just reflects through, it reflects through everything, like, the reality is that faking that in post just never looks right. So we really need to be on at least a printout or backlight film or something, or the LED wall is great if you could do, the shots on it, because it really gives you the most flexibility. Because a printout, like, you printed it, that's it. Like, you can't change it on the day if the client's like, oh, I don't like the bokeh, whatever,
Are liquids usually the ones where like 1,000 frames per second is where it really shines? Like, what are the kind of substances or use cases where you really need
so many sticky substances come through the door here? Liquids definitely 1,000 frames plenty of times. But once again, like, your standard, like, pour into Coca-Cola glass or something at 240 looks pretty sexy, so it really depends on like how fast and explosive. If it's a collision versus a pour, it's very different. Like, a pour at 240 can look good, but a collision, needs 1,000 frames, because it's just like, it's so fast, But if it's something like heavy cream or milk, is slightly different because it's a little slower. You got to think about the speed and how close you are to it. Obviously, if you're wider, you don't need as high frame rate as when you're closer, because just like, once again, that, coffee bean, whatever, is moving that much faster in this little area versus when you're looking at a wider frame, right? Like, the feeling of movement, I guess, is kind of the word. But once again, I think that for us, the hybrid of doing some shots 1,000, some not. Once again, virtual production is not going to be for every shoot either. That's just the reality. There's times where, like, once again, we have a team that's in Barcelona right now because they wanted to shoot in Barcelona, that's fine. Like, yes, we could 3D scan that world, gosh, it's splatted, whatever, bring it in here, put it on the wall, like, but still sometimes some productions just what's most efficient and what's going to work out right for what they're trying to go for. But for us, it's like, at least it opens up the possibility where, some shots, can be done on the wall, and on the same day we could do non-wall shots too, right? Like, it doesn't mean that everything has to be done on the wall all day long. Like we did a shoot recently where, like, 3 end card shots that were like the last 4 seconds of the spot were on the wall. Everything else was not on the wall, for these 3 different commercials. And actually that works great, because once again, like, we're not building 3 huge room sets for these like 4 seconds of, each one. They would have been like 3 totally different room sets, which is like, would have been crazy expensive too. Like, we're in New York City, it's not the cheapest place to make work, it's great, a bunch of talented people. But for us, it's like, we are competing on a global scale. Like, most of the people we compete with are not just in New York City. We're competing against people in Poland, people in Mexico, people, in LA, all over the place, Chicago, Toronto, Vancouver, you name it. So those, the ability to save some money by owning a wall of our own that we could run very efficiently, because, pretty much one person could run our wall. We'll bring in a second Unreal person for shoots, but, that's really not that big a lift, and they're a salaried full-time employee. So it also helps, that, we have some flexibility on what we have to pay and charge. But not to say that the wall was cheap or anything, but, it's fine.
What do you tell clients? Like, when do you try to decide if virtual production makes sense? Like, what's the thought process behind that with like clients, and when it does make sense?
Yeah. So, I mean, it starts in the treatment process when we're, kind of bidding for a job, because it's usually like, what's the ask, and what's the budget? Usually we're kind of, it's usually a sliding scale of those 2 things, and the timeline and all the things like that too. But first is creative. Like, what is the story? What are the shots that want to tell that story? And then what's the most efficient way of capturing, or the coolest way of capturing those shots that tell the story, right? So it's kind of looking at each of those, and then do they line up? Like recently there was one that we did that were like, oh, it's a park scene, and they wanted like an office scene. It's like, okay, well, those could go either way. We could actually be in a real park, and then we had to bring, clear the park and get all these extras and permits and, whatever it is. And, and then once again, what time of day do we want to be in? Like, if we have to shoot all day long and make it feel like the same time of day, well, for virtual production is great for that, and, so it's so many different aspects that we need to consider, and once again, at the end of the day, what is it going to pull off the story we're trying to tell? Is it going to be believable? Like, if we had a park that was just empty without any extras or any other people or cars or anything moving by, that would feel fake too, right? So it's just kind of like trying to find the balance of, if we do virtual production, well, the world has to be very real too, right? And we have to have enough time to add all those aspects, and moving clouds and birds and tree and breezes and, whatever it is. Big question is usually like, how long do we need to get the shots done in if we're on location, right? Because how much is the light going to be changing? Because that's also the challenge on location too. Like, you need a sunny day. Well, there's no guarantee you're going to get a sunny day outside. Like, okay, you get lighted, but then how much, what do we need to make that a reality as far as crew? So it really is kind of another tool in our garage, let's say, as far as like, trying to balance, what the right solution is, both creatively and financially for a project. And it just gives us a whole new pathway, which I think is great, because, a few years ago that didn't exist. So for us to have that ability, and, whether we shoot here or we go to another volume too, right? Because our wall is only 10 feet tall. So like, if we needed to do a really big wide shot, we can't do that here. So, we could test it here, and then, okay, great, we'll go to the real stage and, go to either one of the other stages in town, or go, travel to a view stage or whatever. It's just a matter of, each project is so different, and that's the thing. And so many projects are just like a day or 2 days. And and they're trying to squeeze a lot into that day. If you're on location, all you're going to be getting is your location shots, right? Here, we could be doing, location shots on the wall while we're also doing, product shots on the side, and we could have 3 sets going. Like, it's just a different workflow when you're actually in a studio. And for us, we do so much food. Like, that's also a challenge too, right? Like, if we're going to bring chocolate outside, like, it's going to be melting on us, or whatever, ice cream, or
right.
Here we could crank the AC down to like 60 degrees.
Kitchen nearby, food stylist, everything right there.
Exactly. So for us, if it's like pizza, like Domino's literally sends us their pizza oven that we install in our kitchen here, like that, it's like a very different animal. So once again, we love the studio a lot of the time because it gives us just the control. So this is a way to bring that level of production as if you're on location, but to be in the studio is kind of very powerful. And as we build worlds for clients and we have this in, kind of in our repertoire, like now it's like, oh, we already have a beach, we have a living room, we got a nice kitchen. Like we could just adjust those worlds accordingly and be able to like actually turn around a world pretty quickly too, which is, obviously part of the challenge.
Yeah. I mean, do you feel like you're going to have just like not every job's going to require a complete custom build, and it's just like we can have we need a living room and we could just throw an existing living room together.
Yeah, exactly. Because I think, especially the foreground production design is such an important part of it that I think that's always going to change, so I think having something that, the client is like, oh, okay, that works for the background, and that's where we definitely do a lot of previs for clients as well too, because they just, once again, they're still wrapping their head around like, what, how are we going to be at the beach? We're not at the beach, like build a set. You need like truckloads of sand and like whatever. It's like, no, please, no sand. The sand gets on everything. But, so it's like, the previs thing using Unreal as part of that is really great because we could actually show the cinema camera, put a fake foreground set in front of it and everything and a bad looking metahuman or whatever it is. And just like, oh, okay, get the sense of like, okay, now I understand that this is how this is going to work. So, I mean, I think eventually they'll catch on. Like, and we went through this with the robots too. People were like, what, you're going to use a robot to move the camera? Like what, that's crazy. So we have to we're used to educating clients, on, new ways of doing things and, and why, and then after the shoot, they understand like, oh, okay, now I see why we did it that way, and I think, that's a success for us. And one thing we do worry about is like we don't want the client to ever have a bad virtual production experience because like all it takes is one bad experience on anybody's shoot, not even ours, and they're going to be like, no, whatever BBDO says no to virtual production or whatever, big agencies or clients, and that's what happens with the robots too. Like somebody goes onto a shoot with the unexperienced robot operator in some other city, and like they don't get their shots or the thing breaks or whatever it is. Like it just, they're not going to remember those details. They're going to be like, oh, the robots don't work, so that's part of that challenge that I think we are in virtual production as well. And just the lack of education out there. That's why we're definitely excited about our new neighbors here at NYU and their new master's program, which is cool.
Yeah. You sent me some test clips you did of Phantom Track, which we'll show.
Oh, yes.
But
yes.
So Phantom Track, that's Red's frame remapping, right? Where you're filming, the screen is alternating between backgrounds. You're filming two different environments at the same time.
Yep.
What are some potential use cases you see for this?
Cool. Yes. We're very excited. That's why we sent our XL to get upgraded to the XLX. They need a better naming person, copywriter. Ask ChatGPT would come up with something better.
Yeah, maybe Nikon will figure it out.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I mean, Phantom Track, yeah, exactly. Basically, it's just alternating frames between two different backgrounds on the LED wall. The other cool thing that we've been playing with is if we use cream source lights, they could also do frame mapping as well. So you could actually alternate your lighting sources between those two as well, which is super fun. So basically in that scenario, you could actually literally be shooting day and nighttime at the same time. So your actual lighting is all changing. You have one lighting set scenario that's all synced to that one frame, and then that turns off. And the next time the shutter opens, like different lights are on, and it just kind of
you could also
alternates.
map. We saw a demo. You could do the mimics, the Kino mimics, with image-based lighting and sync it to your environment if you had a theoretical night scene and day scene.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, a lot
at normal speeds, though they're not fast enough to
do
at high speed. Yeah,
so you're doing this at 240.
So two 120s. So we can have two 120
clips.
4K timelines on the Red. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Which once again isn't necessary for 99% of the shoots out there for normal people. But I'm Steve. Yeah, exactly.
So you're shooting frame remapping, high speed, and then what are some of the other use cases?
Yeah, so like we could do, basically, and then add into another layer of that motion control. So you could do some insane match cut sequences, basically. So you could be doing two at a time, but then you could do that same move multiple times, and then you could have 8 different match cut scenes that have different worlds, different lighting, different, even practical effects, like one where it's raining, one where it's dry, one, and that your talent action, could match more easily between multiples. So once again, the red only allows you to do so far 2 different video feeds out of it, right? But there's nothing to say that if you had a script that would cut your files apart for you later, you can't do more than 2. You just can't watch it live, basically. So we've actually done this on our Phantom years ago with some other stuff. So not with an LED wall, but just with lighting only. So basically, with 240 frames, you could do technically 10 different scenarios at 24 frames a second, but obviously that frame 1 to 10 will alternate slightly at that point, right? Because you're just changing so many
you have to wait
things.
For it to cycle through. Okay.
Yeah. But I think we could definitely do 4 and you wouldn't feel that difference. So basically we could do 4 match cuts, which we're actually planning a shoot to do right now for a test that I'll share with you whenever we do it, where basically it's kind of like day and night, and then day and night where it's raining and not raining, and then and then you're in 2 other worlds during the raining and not raining, and 2 other worlds during either way. Just a lot of different worlds. Insane match cut, which you'd be like, oh, okay. But with liquids involved, that's where the rain and stuff comes
right, and that's where this comes into play, because you could do your move with the liquid, which is going to be a unique movement
exactly with the real refraction
that you can't repeat.
Yeah.
But
exactly.
You can have that environment. That's really awesome.
Yeah, because I think for us, like, the liquid is really what forces us into this painful place. Because most time, like, just throw up green screen and here we go. You just do it once with the talent, and then you throw the different worlds behind it, and you got your match cut. And you if anything, you change the lights with the foreground. And so once again, very niche use case, even for us, honestly. Most of the, unless the job requires like a lot of match cuts or 2 different worlds, it's part of the story, it doesn't really make sense. But I think at the very least, having the green screen and the background plate of the Unreal world is useful, because then, like, if the client changes their mind later, you could actually very easily change out the Unreal world, but all your reflections, as long as they don't change it completely, should be fairly accurate. If they're just changing little things, it's just actually just a nice back pocket thing to have, for our clients if they want to change something in post, that they're,
right. Like shoot one with the environment, one with the green screen background.
Yeah.
If you need to swap it later, you can. Yeah,
exactly. So that's the biggest use case for Phantom Track that most people will have, is those 2 are a tracking path for the movement, and one that's just like the regular Unreal scene where, like, the wall will just put tracking markers up for you and stuff like that. Or if you want to get like an alpha channel, you can make it either all white or black or whatever, like, depending on what your lighting's doing. So if you know that you're going to want to, like, cut out everything around the person and be able to color match that easier, like, it just gives you some tools for post and VFX to make that just a little easier. But, AI tools and masking is getting so much better too. But, but once again, with liquids, it is tricky, so for us, having that ability is kind of a cool thing.
That is cool. We did a demo last year at NAB with Ghost Frame, similar concepts. They could do 3 or 4 outputs at the same time, but I don't know if they can run at 240. Right. So that's, I think that's your limiting factor.
They can, the megapixels could do 240 also, as far as the processor goes. The thing is, the camera will still only show you 2 things is the challenge. So that's part of the pain, is like, how do you show it to a client when it's like going, boop, 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 like on the monitor, just pretend it's smooth video, like,
right. Because the stuff you're going to do to your or not your other camera is just process it later in post to split, to extract all the frames.
Yeah. It's just a script that just says, like, hey, every frame 1 goes here, every frame 2 goes here, every frame, like, just, resequences the frames. But once again, then if you have to hand it over to like company 3 or something, they're gonna be like, what the hell is this? Like, I can't, color correct this raw file is a hot mess. Yeah. It's like, what went wrong here? Yeah.
You mentioned AI, and I was going to ask about AI stuff, but the one thing, well, to start, have you experimented with any, so talking about 240 frames, 1,000 frames per second, have you experimented with any of the AI tools for slow-mo extraction and
yes, over the years.
How are they?
Just not with liquid, like, because liquid is constantly changing shape, and it's just kind of thinking it's going to keep going the direction it's going, but it's not, if it's like a person, let's say jumping over a, high jump or something, whatever it is, some of them do a pretty good job, but like fluid things, it's just too sloppy. Maybe someday they'll get there, but I think, But AI tool for, all sorts of other stuff, like even designing, background plates for 2D and 2.5D stuff is great. Like Kubrick I've been using for that stuff. And then even tools for, ChatGPT, whatever. I think once again, it's another tool to use. And I think AI is going to be, it's such a big word right now that it's like AI,
Yes,
whatever. But
there are a million uses and applications of that.
Yeah. But I think at the end of the day, it's been part of our life already for a while in some ways. And, we've just started to call it its own thing, but it's really just been part of the tool set that we're using. It's how a lot of the software, does great masking in Photoshop and all these things. It's kind of just, it's machine learning for better or worse. I'm all about it helping us make cooler stuff easier. Like I have no objection to that part of it. Like I think the generative side is its own world and it should be labeled something else. I guess generative AI, I guess it is, but that should be the AI word and the rest is just like, it's machine learning, I feel, but everyone's just kind of clumping it all together. But no, our clients are way too crazy to like be able to prompt a commercial that they actually want through generative AI. Like it just, the level of detail, like especially in our stuff, right? Because it's just like, oh, that one sesame seed and that little bit of cream cheese, and oh no, it needs a little more ketchup, and it needs like good luck prompting that one.
Yeah, I would love to get your soundbite on this because I remember when Sora came out and there were like some demos of like generated like slow-mo product shots of like fruit flying in the air, and then Twitter is like, rest in peace, like product photographers, like this is going to replace it. From a professional standpoint, what is the process that clients go through of all of the details that go into creating a slow-mo product shot?
Yeah, exactly. A slow-mo product shot, there's so many details about exactly the shape of the liquid or the object and how they're interacting, like the lighting on the object and the liquid. There's so much that goes into exactly that, too. So much that we'll literally like put the object on a robot to move it in exactly a certain way so that like in, to my sponsors, in a specific way, this rotates and the label appears exactly that way when we want it to, while the camera comes in closer, the liquid wraps around it at exactly that 0.01 second moment in time. Like the layers of detail in what we do is just so extreme that there's just no way to prompt that. It's just, even if I prompted it and it got me close, changing that prompt to get it to where I want it is just like impossible. Like it's just not a thing. But not to say that, it's not going to be a tool to make. I would love it to generate worlds to put up on the VP wall, and stuff like that. Like if that got great, I'd be all about it. But our clients are still going to be putting the real thing in front of the camera, whether it's on a fake background or not. Like that's a different story. But I think their particularness about exactly how this is lit and how this is portrayed and that this is actually a real thing that they actually make that they want in front of the camera. No, because like what I really tell people, right? The way to summarize it the most is like, if AI Sora was going to replace what I do today, CGI would have done it 10 years ago. Because like, it's just a prompted version of CGI, right? And we still luckily get hired to do this crazy stuff by these wonderful people. And for a reason, like they want a real thing, their real product in front of the camera and making decisions as a team as we shoot the thing. Not just one guy typing away into a computer of like, oh, make a beautiful commercial for Pure Leaf, Yeah.
Yeah. Also, if you need to tweak something, you just go to your timeline and adjust the keyframes for all of your timing, your robots. And it's not like reprompt this and maybe I'll get a modification or maybe I'll get something completely different that was completely off base.
Yeah. If you're okay with a little luck and just, okay, that looks good enough and that'll work, great. I think there's going to be a lot of really bad AI generated commercials in our future, but that's just, once the legal things all get worked out too, because that's years ahead of us still, so I think that's the biggest thing is like so many of our clients, we actually have to sign waivers that we're not using AI in any form or shape as part of this process of the shoot that we're working on, blah, 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 blah. So I think until those things are really laid out, the multi-billion-dollar companies are not going to take the risk on their Super Bowl ad or their big national TV ad being AI generated, because like the litigation costs will outweigh just hiring us to do it,
And so even on those spots, would that be like no AI background? So the stuff we're using Kubrick, that's a completely separate.
That would have to get a
thing.
Special request. Like that would be a special waiver from a client to allow us to do it on a job. Yeah. because basically for the most part, the risk has to lie on them. Like, I'm not going to take the risk. They have more money than me, so right now it's mostly for test shots that we're using it for, and just kind of getting understanding of what it is. But you can also use Kubrick with, stock photos that you could buy licensing to and 2.5D and cut them up and stuff like that. So there's not it has to be AI generated, or they might
you give it a 2D image and have it generate some 2.5D perspective, because they have a pretty good extra depth extractor.
Or use generative fill just to replace some parts in the actual 2D image you bought from, Shutterstock or whatever, So, I think there's a hybrid out there that's not like, I just prompted this whole shot, where, because I think photo retouchers have been doing that with Photoshop now for a little bit already too. Like, oh, generative fill and do this, that's it. That's AI, of some sort. It's just not, and it is generative AI too, where it's generating that filled area, right? Using its database of knowledge, right? So it's not like, it's not completely different, but I think there's something to be said about an image that started from scratch as a generative shot, that there is so much mystery as to who owns that and who has the right to that, and all that stuff. Yeah.
Right. Or removing an object from a wall is not that mysterious of
right. They've been doing that for a long time. Right. Yeah.
Going back to the real thing, can you walk me through the thought process, the planning process? Probably because it was the most recent video I saw, but you had one video recently of behind the scenes, the meatball shot of dropping a bunch of meatballs into the marinara sauce.
The sauce. Yeah.
Yeah. So like, what's a shot like that? What's the planning process or the thought process behind how you create a shot like that?
For sure. So that was Firehouse Subs, our client. It was a meatball sub. So they're like, how do we show the meatball part of the sub in a cool way? And we want it to feel saucy. And we're like, great, then let's get some meatballs and let's put them into sauce. And first, then there's a lot of questions I have to ask, like, do you guys actually use real marinara sauce in your actual sub? Because they can't portray something that's not real. It's like, yes, we do. Does it actually look good as a big pull? There's a lot of check boxes that we have to check before we say, okay, great, this is the shot we want to do. And then it was like, okay, great. And the meatballs themselves look good without the sauce on them too, because that's also, meatballs are a weird thing sometimes, so all those check, great. All right. So we're like, all right, great. We want to show then meatballs dropping into the sauce, and then keep the camera kind of pushing through that, ideally a bit into edit was the thought process, because they loved the camera kind of pushing through stuff in other commercials we had done for them. Great. That sounds easy enough, right? Great. Just get some meatballs and drop them, and there we go. But then we wanted to track the camera with the meatballs as they went in and keep them in focus and things like that. And so that's where they get complicated, right? If you're just locking off the camera and watching them drop in, great, easy. But the second you want to have full control of where each meatball is, when it hits the surface, how many of them are there? So we created this huge rig that was actually, in the BTS, you don't hear the sound, but it was actually really loud, because it's like all these pneumatic cylinders, like air cylinders that just go, bah! Like they basically have these little fingers, like tines, like a fork almost, and the meatballs are sitting on it. And then these just pull away so fast that then the meatballs drop in place down into the meat sauce, right? It's almost like when you pull the fabric off the table, which if you didn't catch our thing with Gavin from the Slow-Mo guys, that was a fun one too. We're like, can we do that actually? So for the meatballs, yeah. So now we have control of where the meatballs are, how many we could put in there, how many layers of meatballs we have. So I think we had 3 layers of height, so that some are landing while some are still in the air, and some are even closer to the lens, because parallax is awesome and super fun. And then now the robot tracks with those as they fall down into the sauce, and we can do a focus pull in there if we need to, because it's all programmed. And we have to get the timing of that just perfect, and get all the food styling things right. And sometimes we have to either thicken the marinara sauce or make it thinner, just make sure when they impact, it just it doesn't go anywhere. We want it to splash and stuff like that. So there's, just water added or whatever we have to do to it. And yeah, then we get through that whole shot idea, get it to the client, everybody signs off of it, go through pre-pro, show the rig we built and how it works. That's where our effects team builds all that stuff here in-house. And we'll actually probably put it in front of a camera almost every rig gets in front of camera before shoot day most of the time, just to make sure it actually works. Because then it's a little late otherwise. And then, yeah, then on the day, it's really just getting that timing just right. And literally we're making like 0.01 second increment changes, like, and repeatability is honestly everything to us. Like, we really need it to be like, the rig itself has to be super accurate, because if it spread just a little later or a little earlier, like, there's a chance that the robot's going to run into the meatballs, because if it's going to do the same thing every time. So it's really about just control, honestly, because, like, as I said, like, even with the prompting, there's like no control, right? Like, and the things we do are just like extreme control. And like, that's the only way we get the shot that the client's happy with, right? So for us, it's just like really trying to like zoom in on like every little detail and try to take the human element of variance and, mistakes out of it. Like, oh, the AC didn't pull focus, like, we're not using ACs to pull focus, so all that stuff to get the shot. And yeah, exactly, that was like 2 seconds in the commercial or something, but it takes a lot of effort goes into something like that.
How many takes do you have to go through in iterations?
That wasn't too bad. That was a pretty reliable rig. And like, once we had like the placement of the meatballs, I don't know, maybe 8 takes or something on it, something like that. It's not crazy. Yeah. No, because once again, like, so much is before take one, you're just doing the practice drops and stuff like that with like, without the marinara there, and just like with some like 2 meatballs just to kind of get the timing right. And then you're like, okay, the timing looks right, put them in, get the lighting right. And then, a few takes just to tweak positions and timings, and you're pretty much there. And then it's repeatable. That's the thing. Like, once you kind of nail that down, like, then it's just like, great, we're done. Like, you want another take? Great, we'll do another take. It'll be almost the same, but here we go. So much of the effort, that's the difference, is like, there's so much upfront effort in the work that we do. And that's where, some ways virtual production is familiar to us. It's like, yeah. It's like, you need to put that time ahead of time in pre-production and testing and all that stuff, so that on the day, it's working. You'll make little tweaks, but you're not like reinventing the wheel on the day.
What would you say is your craziest rig or craziest shot that you've done?
Oh man, our craziest rig is for sure what we call the spinning rig of death. Nobody died, but we were worried our Phantom was going to die on it. It's just this like crazy spinning rig we made where like the camera was going 35 miles per hour around like a center platform, and it was for Jack Daniels. We did the shoot, and basically they wanted to see like a lime wedge fall in the air and have it twisting because the camera is moving around it. Then it hit like this drink, and then the liquid bounced out. But like, as it's bouncing out, you get the perspective change. And then we've done it a couple other times. We did a Doritos thing with it, with a ball of fire in the middle too, which is super cool. It's just like, it's like chips flying in a ball of fire with a camera going around it. It's like, come on, like that's so much fun. And we might bring it back someday. We'll see. Well, it hasn't, come back again. We were like, what else can we do? Because we're like, the camera was locked in, so it's just moving in orbit. Like, my thought is like, oh, can we do like a camera move while it's spinning around, while things are exploding in front of an LED wall? No, I don't know. So, and then some of our favorite shoots, have been, Pepsi has given us a lot of really fun projects. We did, recently we did Purely for them, but we do like, for the last, what year is this?
24.
7 years. Yeah. We've done 2 big global campaigns for Pepsi for their main, Pepsi branding, which is run in every country but the US, which is funny. Pepsi is like, there's global and then there's the US, and they've let us have a lot of fun and just really experiment. Like, oh, okay, what if we fill a balloon with Pepsi and put it in a tank of water, and then we pop it, and then we push the camera through the pop the balloon of Pepsi. Just like, once again, every time we do it, we're like, how do we push it that much further? How do we do something, cool? Just like this last time, we shot some stuff at like 8,000 frames a second, because we were just like, oh, it looks so different at 8,000 frames compared to 1,000 frames a second, 8 times slower. So, they're like, oh, okay, but that has new challenges too, because camera movement like is going to be 8 times slower too, and the camera was already moving as fast as it could be. So how do we cheat, to make it feel like we're moving faster than we were? And so each one has its new challenges, but it's all about, and those are our favorite projects. It's just like, how do we bring innovation to the story and the process on every project, right? And I think that's what gets us excited here. Like, my worst nightmare is doing the same shoot every day for like a year, unless they're paying a lot of money, then maybe it'd be okay for a year. for Pepsi itself, we've come up with some crazy rigs as well, like, these turbine interwoven strands of liquid that are, spinning. And if you ever want to come by in Brooklyn, man, you're welcome to do a little tour here. Like, we have a freaking Haas CNC machine. It's like huge thing to make. You make like car parts from this thing,
So are you machining rigs and stuff too? Is that
yeah. So it's fully like, we have like a room of 3D printers and machines and like lathes and welders, and like, it's crazy. Because once again, like, we need to create these things, and the precision needed for them is just getting higher and higher, because like we're asking more and more out of them. Like, it's like, oh, back when, the good old days was a piece of wood and a bungee, and like, there you go. Now we're really kind of dialing in that precision, which is super fun. It makes sense for us, and the turnaround times and all that stuff too.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's a little magical workshop.
It's robots, like, it's crazy.
That's been fascinating. Where can people find out more info about your behind the scenes stuff?
Cool. Yeah, I mean, you have all the links, but basically my Instagram is probably the most fun. Steve Giralt on Instagram, on TikTok, Steve Giralt 6, whatever. I don't know why I'm just the sixth one, and then the garage.tv is our main site, and the garagerentals.com is our services site. So yeah, all the stuff that we do as far as effects, robotics, LED wall, that we do that as services for other people too. So if anybody requires high speed virtual production or robotics or motion control or effects, like, once again, we are happy to collaborate. Once again, we're here not just to make work for me and our directors. We're here to just be part of the greater community of image makers. And especially if you're somebody innovative and you really want to push the limits on stuff, we could definitely be friends. But, and then, this summer we're considering putting together a little like open house kind of summit here on the virtual production stuff, here in Brooklyn as well. I'll let you know.
Oh, cool.
If we pull that together, just to kind of show off the process. And, cause I think a lot of people, it's just like motion control, right? A lot of people have never touched it, have never used it. And we're really trying to make it feel a little more accessible. So we love, opening up our space to people and letting them, touch it for a day. I'll let you know.
Cool. Awesome. Well, thanks a lot, Steve. Appreciate it.
Cool. No, thank you, Jared.
And that is it for this episode. Many thanks to Steve for coming on and sharing his knowledge. If you enjoyed this episode, please give it a thumbs up or leave a 5-star review in your podcast app of choice. And let me know what your thoughts are down in the comments below on the YouTube link for this episode. If you want more of this, be sure to subscribe to either our YouTube channel or your podcast app of choice, and the VP Land newsletter, vp-land.com. Links and show notes for everything we talked about are also available on the website. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you in the next episode.